So guys, a very, very special video today. I have David Szymanski, the developer of Dusk, on the channel for an interview today. If you want to say hello, David.
Hello.
And maybe just if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. Well, I am David Szymanski. I make video games and other stuff. Video games are the thing that I make for money. The other stuff I make for, I don't know, sanity, I guess.
Yeah.
And most people probably know me for Dusk. That's the most popular thing I've done.
Yep.
But I've also done some horror games, and then Dusk, and then some more horror games.
Sweet. And that kind of just leads into just the first bit, I suppose, my history around experiencing Dusk for the first time. And just to go back, maybe to throw back to, I was always primarily a PC gamer, but I did have a Game Boy as well. So I did have a console as well. I didn't get much when I was young, but I had that PC. The PC I had was a Pentium 200 MX, 32 megs of RAM. I always was a massive fan of Doom, Quake, Duke 3D, all the FPS games. And when I got older, I kind of didn't get back into PC gaming for a long time, and there was quite a long lull. So not till around late 2017, maybe late summer 2017, I got a brand new PC again. And obviously I had laptops and everything for work and all that, but what I mean is PC gaming and a proper gaming PC. And interestingly enough, the first game I bought was the early access at the time, Dusk.
Really give that GPU a workout.
Yeah. And everyone was scratching my head. I remember my wife and my buddy was like, what? You're not just like buy the latest and greatest. What are you doing buying this old game? I said, this isn't an old game. This is a new game. But it's just retro styled. They couldn't understand it for a while. Until I played the game, they were like, oh, this is great. And then I had I didn't have to wait too long to get the full game, because at that point, the game had released then in late 2018, if I'm correct, David. I think you... Yeah,
late 2018.
So, yeah, I mean, I got to pretty much experience the entire game that year. But funnily enough, on my brand new PC, and it was just, I found it a funny story, because it was like, you're not supposed to be playing the greatest and the best, and I said, well, this is one of the greatest and the best FPSs, come on, cop on. That's just a brief rundown of my experience and how I found the game first. So let's get into the first question. Tell me about New Blood.
New Blood Interactive is, oh boy, well, we don't have time to really get into what New Blood Interactive is, because it's like, you need like a PhD to understand it. It's sort of like a flat structure-ish developer and publisher. I think we're a little bit like what people probably imagine Valve is like, in a way. Dave likes to describe it as just a group of friends who make games, which is kind of accurate. We bring developers in that we think are going to be a good fit and are making good games, and then we all sort of just develop our projects alongside each other and do whatever needs to be done to get them developed and get them, published and marketed.
Okay, that's understandable. So, I mean, that kind of maybe leads into my first question. You kind of answered some of it already. So my kind of first question was, are you completely self-funded, and how many people actually work on your games or are in the actual company? So from my recall, there's 4, but correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh gosh, do you mean me or New Blood?
I mean New Blood in general, but
man, there's so many people.
Oh really? Okay.
Yeah,
this is news to me. Okay.
Well, so when Dusk started, and New Blood kind of existed before Dusk, but not really in any, not in any sort of recognizable form. It was just sort of a thing Dave had going.
Yeah.
So when Dusk was being developed, it was basically me, Dave, and Andrew.
Okay.
And then there were some of Dave's friends who assisted with some stuff. Like, things like when we were at a convention, they helped with the booth and stuff like that. And then throughout the course of Dusk, developing Dusk, we actually started bringing in fans of Dusk to work on different things. I think it started out with Dusk World, where I was just like, man, I just couldn't get some stuff working. And there was this guy on the forums called 500 Points, Scott, who I knew had worked with Unity, and I was like, okay, can you help me out with this? And he then kind of ended up getting brought on. I think Cam was already around. There were some people who were kind of around from the Rot days that then got a more sort of official position in New Blood. And
Okay, sorry for clarification. Rise of the Triad you're talking
yeah,
about.
yeah, sorry.
Okay. Sorry, yeah.
Dave and actually a bunch of people who are part of New Blood now worked on the Rise of the Triad remake back in the day.
Yeah, I remember that.
But anyway, we've just kept accumulating people, and usually it's everyone is kind of working on their own projects. Like we've got the Ultra Kill team; they're all working on Ultra Kill. We got the Fallen Aces team; they're all doing Fallen Aces. We've got now a separate external Discord for contractors that I suggested we set up, and Dave thought that was a good idea. Who just work on all sorts of stuff, and then internally we all sometimes help out with other projects. Like I've done, for instance, a few sounds for Fallen Aces. Not enough that I'm a developer on it. It's just at some point Trey was like, "Hey, I need a sound for this," and I'm like, "Oh well, I'm not busy right now. I can do that." So yeah, I don't really know off the top of my head how many people.
No, that's fine. So it's actually learning for me and learning for anyone listening here. It's a bigger company. It's a bigger company than I thought originally. And I suppose maybe that's only because I've only experienced a certain set amount of your games. But as I said, my experience was Dusk initially. So yeah, no, that's good to know. And I've only kind of directly interacted with the two Daves, as in yourself, Dave, and Dave O'Shry. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Oshry, excuse me.
And the weirdest part is I'm technically not even like an employee of New Blood. Like I don't collect a salary or anything. I'm just sort of part of it.
Yeah.
Mostly by virtue of having been the guy who made Dusk.
Okay, understood. Yeah. But maybe if I'm being frank on that one, Dusk is probably a most popular game as well in the company. Well, it's definitely the most known game. Ultra Kill now.
Ultra Kill's surpassed it, but the Dusk is second.
Okay, yeah. And Ultra Kill is kind of still in the process of being built, really. It's still in early access, correct?
By the time Ultra Kill comes out, it's going to have way surpassed Dusk, I think, at the rate it's going.
Okay. And I'm saving that bad boy until it comes out fully. So I'm just resisting for now.
Nice.
Yeah, but definitely want to cover that in the future. So maybe I can move on to some of the questions, and I think you've kind of answered some of the ones as well, kind of in between there. But first and foremost, what inspired you specifically to become a game developer?
So I've been making games since I was an adolescent, sort of like young teenager, adolescent. I don't remember exactly when. I think it was around when I was 12-ish. I was really obsessed with Myst. And Myst was created on this program called HyperCard, which was sort of a early presentation software similar to PowerPoint. And in school, we were learning a program called HyperStudio, which is similar to HyperCard. And one day, it just sort of clicked that, like, hey, I could make my own thing like Myst in HyperStudio. And I did that, and it wasn't very good. But that's what got me started on thinking of, like, I don't have to just play games, I could actually make games. And then I started learning how to program and doing stuff. And for years, it was just a hobby.
Yeah, okay.
I don't think... I feel like people don't remember this or don't know this, but, like, it's only really been within maybe the last decade or so that making money as an indie developer has even really been a thing for more than just a select group of people.
Okay.
So for the longest time, like, I couldn't make money making games. I didn't even have that expectation. I thought, maybe someday in the far future I can work for, I might work for a company, but I didn't really seriously think that would ever happen.
Right. But indie, sorry, not to interrupt you, but indie development's kind of boomed in the last 6 or 7 years, really. Like,
yes.
Yeah.
A big contributing factor to that was Steam starting Greenlight and then, transitioning over to Steam Direct.
Yeah.
That was probably the biggest. That and Xbox Live were probably the two biggest factors. But yeah, then around 2014, I started learning the Unity engine, and I made this game. Well, to learn Unity, I made this game called Fingerbones,
Okay.
which sort of took off as a. This is right when indie horror was like a hot commodity on YouTube, and so it didn't become the next Slender, but it did well enough that I was like, wow, okay, maybe this next game I could actually make some money with.
Yeah.
At that point, I wasn't thinking of Steam. I was just thinking of putting it on itch. So I made the next one, which was the Moon Sliver. Put that on itch. Made, I don't know, maybe $100 or something, which was like still insane to me at the time.
Yeah.
Put it on Greenlight, and then eventually it got through Greenlight, and that's really when my career started. Because then Steam is where I started making at that. Well, it wasn't very good money, but like I made enough money that I felt like I could pursue it as at least a part-time job, and then by the time I got to Dusk, then it became my full-time job.
So you probably answered a few questions there, but a couple of questions kind of cropped up. So the game, is Dusk developed in Unity? Is that the engine that you're using for Dusk?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So it's built in that engine. So I had that question there, but maybe the next one then. So what was the transition point then coming into Dusk, and was it that Dave himself? New Blood obviously existed at this point. Was it that's when you joined them, or was that?
Yeah. So I started Dusk during this period where I'd sort of gone really hard making these horror games and making them in a really short amount of time, and had gotten kind of burnt out on it, and so I took a bit of time off just to do like prototype stuff just for fun, and one of those prototypes turned into Dusk. So I was working that on my own for a while, and then I just randomly decided to send a build of it to Dave Oshry, who I didn't even really know who he was, except that he was sort of a Twitter personality, and he had worked on the Rise of the Triad reboot, which I actually really liked.
Mm-hmm.
So I sent it to him thinking maybe he would like tweet about it or something like that, and he came back with like, "Hey, do you want a publishing agreement?"
Bang! Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I was actually kind of suspicious at first because like I had no idea who New Blood was. Like no one had ever heard of New Blood. They had like a single game out, which was Super Galaxy Squad, and it hadn't done that well. So I was like, really? But then I, talked with him a bit more, and I was like, okay, this could be really, this could be something.
Yeah, and definitely
it
ended up being something for sure.
Yeah.
So that's interesting to know the history and how you ended up working with them. So that's really cool. So I mean, I'm getting the vibe that you kind of initially were. I had a question here in regards to what's your favorite genre. And I had initially assumed it was going to be a first-person shooter, but when I look at Dusk and when I play Dusk, and even when I was recording for Gloomwood there, because I played that a bit, the demo that's on Steam, you can see the horror roots deeply within both of those games in a way, especially in certain levels in Dusk, and also in when I was playing Gloomwood, it really felt like a survival horror game in a way.
Mm-hmm.
So would that be your favorite genre of game, or is it just truly FPS at heart, or what?
It's FPS, yeah. But I think so. My relationship with horror is maybe a bit non-traditional, because I didn't grow up with it. In fact, quite the opposite. I was terrified of horror when I was younger, and even as a teenager, like I didn't want anything to do with it. And it wasn't until college that I even got introduced to any horror movies. And then I kind of fell in love with it. It was a weird reversal.
Yeah.
But even when I was younger, even when I didn't, I was like, no, I don't like horror. I always liked things that had creepiness to it. Like that didn't extend into games for some reason. I loved Quake, and back at that time when I played it, it's like there was a creepiness to Quake. It was
there's an atmosphere to Quake.
Yeah,
so
my favorite genre is FPS, but my favorite mood is definitely stuff that's like horror or horror adjacent.
Okay, and brilliant. And that kind of leads to the question I had, and you kind of half answered it there. So for me, when I played Dusk first, I immediately got that id Software, old school id Software feel, but at the same time, it felt new and fresh to me. And it didn't feel like I was playing a clone or a replica of something or something trying to be something else. It still, to me, felt fresh. And I think the horror elements mixed in with it and the atmosphere was what got me. So my point being, id Software are known for making the most iconic shooters, especially in the 90s. So I'm assuming they are your biggest influence. And when I look at Dusk as well, is it kind of brought back that old school shooter, and it brought it to a new age audience, really. If for me personally, I would have been a fan anyway. But it's not just about it's 17, 18-year-olds, 20-year-olds, young male and female gamers who are getting introduced to that genre as well. So So I'm assuming they're your biggest influence, or is there others?
Definitely for shooters, or definitely for Dusk. I mean, most of Dusk referenced just about any FPS you could come up with from that time period around the 90s or the early 2000s. But
and the movie as well. But I get into that in a while.
But yeah, the Doom and Quake. Doom was the biggest gameplay influence, at least initially, before I started. Just Dusk kind of got its own gameplay identity, and then Doom or Quake was the biggest aesthetic influence.
Yeah, so that kind of moves on to the segment, really onto Dusk itself. So I mean, maybe some straight off the bat questions here. Why did you call the game Dusk? Is there a meaning behind it? Would maybe the first one?
So that actually goes back to when I was a young teenager and just starting kind of with programming, and starting to get into shareware and like first-person shooters and stuff. I really wanted to make something like Quake, and the game that I sort of designed was called Dusk, and the only reason it was called Dusk is that was what cool one, Can you still hear me?
I can still hear you, yeah.
Okay, it just said it was reconnecting. Sorry. Anyway, that was a...
I'll just double check it's recording. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Okay. That was a cool one-word title that sort of had the feel that I wanted. Yeah,
it's just a one-liner, Dusk, Quake, Doom. You got it stands out. It's not too, it doesn't need to be so elaborate, but yeah. That's what I felt as well. So yeah, that's cool to know. So I suppose even just before we kind of delve into the detail of Dusk, so that came out in early access, and as I spoke earlier, that's how I played the game first. I got it early access a couple of months before launch. I played on my new PC. I'm kind of a retro style shooter on my new PC. Everyone's like, "What are you doing?" And then they looked at the game and they're like, "This is epic." But yeah, they kind of judge a book by its cover, and then they figured out, no, this actually we were really wrong. But so has that early access had a positive impact on the development of Dusk and maybe future titles? But I suppose just in between that, because Gloom World came out as a demo, it's not early access. But it obviously definitely has helped development of Dusk and Ultra Kill now as well.
Yeah, I think it working so well for Dusk was a big influence on why that's been the direction that New Blood Games have gone since. Because it was immensely successful for Dusk, not just sales wise, but also like just being able to build the game alongside community feedback, like alongside the community, was extremely useful. Because feedback we got about episode 1, then what people liked and what people didn't like, you could take into consideration going into episode 2. Instead of having made the entire thing and then you put it out and then it turns out, there's this one thing that everyone hates and it's in the entire game and you can't really do anything about it now. That was really useful. I think that having having that constant community interaction and feedback during Dusk's development was very helpful in making Dusk as good as it could be, and it's been helpful for other New Blood games also. Gloomwood is not in early access yet, but it is going to go into early access, and we're going to try doing something similar. Although that one's going to be a little more complicated to figure out because it's not really a level-based game. It's a not an open world game, but the entire game is open to explore at once.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. And I've noticed that playing the demo. So is that new information, or is that something everybody knows already, that it is coming to early access?
Oh, I have no idea.
Okay,
I think we've talked about it.
Okay, cool. Well, maybe that's a first here on the channel. Anyway,
I'm pretty
that's
sure
great
we've
to
talked
hear.
about it. We just haven't said when.
Okay. Yeah. I get to some questions that I probably can't ask, but I'll ask them anyway and see how we get on. But anyway, just back to Dusk before we do move on to Gloomwood. So a couple of things on Dusk. One of my favorite parts in Dusk is the subtle throwbacks to other forms of media, and I think you mentioned that already, without looking to directly replicate it, but it's just more throwbacks and stuff like that. To me, I think it was the end of Chapter 2. Now, I played it, I've beaten it on both the Nintendo Switch and the PC. The Nintendo Switch was my third playthrough, and I played through it twice on PC. And there's a part where there's a boss fight, and it's an action star, and it sounds like Arnold Schwarzenegger. But man, I laughed so hard at that. That was just so funny. I think it's at the end of Chapter 2, one of the last couple of levels. I'm maybe correct me if I'm wrong.
No, it is. You're right.
Well, whose idea was that? And I want to know as well, who did the voice acting for it, because it's so funny.
So that's Dave.
Okay, all right.
And that's his character, who actually started in the Rise of the Triad remake, not in Dusk.
Right.
If you go back and play that, there's this random. He's not even like special looking or anything. He's just this random like soldier named Big John, and that's where all those voice lines are from. We didn't re-record anything.
Right.
So I don't know what. I think it was just a character that Dave like a voice Dave did, and then they put him in the game, and then since he was big beams, then while we were making Dusk, Dave's like, we have to put Big John in the game. Like, okay, sure, why not?
Okay.
And the fact that he shows up in such a like tonally inappropriate
it's
place,
so random.
It's
so random.
And it's right after this big sort of not really somber, but this big moment where the roof opens up and you see you're in this there's this giant skyline of buildings above you, and it's sort of an atmospheric moment, and then I'm Big John.
Yeah. No, but it there's just that little prods of fun in between the seriousness and the mood, which is great. I found.
That's it. I've always thought that was a quintessential part of 90s shooters. Like if you go and play, Doom, or it's where Doom was meant to be a horror game at the time, or I should say Doom was a horror game. Like that was scary to people at the time. That was like a realistic, a frighteningly realistic game. And it's still filled with all sorts of really stupid jokes just out of the blue. And making Dusk, like, that was a conscious decision to have that, to have that emulated, to have
and it works.
It
works. It's just having a nice blend of it, and it's not peppered into the game. It's just subtle and small kind of not repeated too much, which is cool.
It extended also to like the enemy designs and stuff, where like I specifically tried to design the enemies so that they hit that sweet spot where you were never sure if you were supposed to be like scared and disturbed by them, or whether they were supposed to be goofy.
Okay.
And you especially see that with ones like what? Except for
two characters, which always freak me out. It's the guys that are invisible, and then they make these really weird noise, and you don't see them till you shoot them. Yeah, they just freak me out.
The Wendigos. Yeah.
Yes, and then there's the other guy with like the real big mouth open. And he's
See,
running
that one,
towards you.
that's actually, I think, the quintessential example of that, which is, like, I designed him to just look, he just looks absolutely ridiculous, but in, like, a terrifying way.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's like, is this silly or is this scary? You can't
No,
really
it was
tell.
scary. It was scary.
Yeah.
I
That was, or other ones like Cart Dog. Like, the concept behind Cart Dog is just, like, so grotesque that you have to laugh at it.
yeah.
And since doing Dusk, I've kind of realized that's something that I can do that is pretty effective for people.
hmm
That's kind of why I took the direction I did with Squirrel Stapler, where I'm like, if I make something that's sort of grotesque that I think is funny, a lot of times it turns out that, like, scares or disturbs people. Because I just have a, utterly warped sense of humor, apparently. So, I'm like, okay, well, if I want to make something scary, I'll just make something that's, like, grotesque and funny to me, and then it will work.
Yeah, and add creepy sounds to it too, because that doesn't help. I mean, I remember playing that the first time. I was like, why did I turn the lights off? Why have I a headphone? Why have I a headset on? This is not a good thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, so maybe that kind of leads into just the next question on Dusk. So, I mean, when I look at each chapter in Dusk, they're also drastically different to each other. Especially with the 3 chapters, but they do link together so well in the end. So the subtle storytelling, I suppose, for me was quite underrated in between the actual action itself. And there is lull points. So for me as well, as what I enjoyed the most was it's not always heavy action. There is certain I wouldn't call them downtime moments. It's more slower paced segments that are actually kind of creepy. And then it gets into the action again. So maybe what inspired you to kind of create that kind of design and backstory, which would be a little bit different to your regular Dooms and your Quakes in that respect?
I'm not really sure, honestly. It just kind of made sense to me. Like, like I said previously, that I've that horror vibe, and FPSs, and especially classic FPSs, for me have always gone hand in hand.
Yeah.
So when making Dusk, it just made sense to me that sometimes it would be more of a horror game, and sometimes it'd be more of an action game, and those two things weren't mutually exclusive.
I think that's the feedback which I've read myself, and obviously my own feedback is, I think that's why it was so popular with people. So to that point, Dusk was originally built for PC, and I'm just going to ask 2 more questions on Dusk. We move on to Gloomwood, and it's more so around this Nintendo Switch port, and obviously Steam Deck coming up too. But the Nintendo Switch port is considered by many to be one of the greatest console ports in an FPS this generation. And I'm reading that from a couple of articles. So I think the thing there was how hard was it to maintain practically 60 FPS gameplay on that console? And to be honest,
actually.
Yeah, and I mean,
and I'm not going to blame the Switch for that. Some of it was just I'm very upfront about the fact that I am not a very good programmer. I never have been. It's never been my main interest in game design. I like making the games. I don't like making pretty code. So Dusk on PC was created to function and not to be pretty, or there's a lot of hackiness in it, and which works fine on PC, but some of those hacks did not work fine on Switch, and that combined with our goal of making a port that played and ran extremely well on the platform is why it ended up taking so long. Because Scott, again, the guy who originally helped out with Duskworld, he headed up sort of the Switch the Switch porting process, and there were a lot of things that had to be redone or fixed. Essentially, to get it, we could have put it out at running at 30 or lower and stuff, and it could have been out earlier, but we just didn't want to do that.
No, and you made the right choice. Yeah. And fans can be, annoying at times. I imagine they're like, "Give me Dusk now on Switch. Give it to me now." But
it wasn't too bad. I mean, honestly, like, people nagging you because they really want to play, the thing you're making is a good problem to have. That's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
a bit. I would consider something truly annoying to be people who are like, threatening you or like, getting legitimately angry at you because you haven't released the thing. But yeah, pretty much everything I ever got was people who were just like, "Hey, when's the Switch port? I really want to play it."
Yeah,
Like,
that was
well, we
probably
really want
me.
to be done with it too.
I was one of the more calm people, but it would have been me on Twitter, probably.
Right.
But so to that point, then Dusk is coming to Steam Deck. Well, technically, Steam Deck is going to be compatible with most of the games. But just to one question on that, because I pre-ordered the Steam Deck. I think the middle of the road one. It does have the SSD in it, I think, but I got that in July, so I'm assuming it's going to be start shipping sometime this quarter, next quarter, whatever. So you guys, I've seen the video for Steam Deck, and you've showed Dusk playing on the Steam Deck.
Mhm.
Obviously, Valve have sent you them. So was there much work that you had to do with that, or did you just Dusk become instantly compatible with Steam Deck, or?
I'll be honest, I haven't kept a very close eye on that process. That's another
Okay.
thing that the guys are working on. I don't have a Steam Deck personally to try it on.
Yeah.
I know that's something that Scott has been testing to get working, and we're currently. I don't know how much I can say about that, but
No, that's fine. That's fine.
yeah. So it hasn't been as big a deal as the Switch port, that's for sure. But
Okay. Yeah, I suppose maybe that's more just maybe a straightforward question that people are asking. Is it just a case that your game is on Steam, so it automatically work with Steam Deck? But it sounds to me like it's not that easy. So,
yes and no. It seems like, again, I don't actually have the Steam Deck, so I've only
yeah,
seen what Scott has said and stuff. But it seems like a case where it's like there are definitely things that can not work properly.
yeah, okay. That's good information though, because at least folks know that. So maybe to move on to Gloomwood, and this is another one that I'm particularly excited about. I like survival horror as well as I like my first-person shooters. And
Same,
this,
honestly.
okay, so this is the feeling I got with Gloomwood, where it's if you compare Dusk with Gloomwood, they're not the same game, and if some people are expecting another Dusk, they're not getting it at all here.
No, definitely not.
So I think you mentioned structurally, roughly structurally, that Gloomwood is kind of an open, one large open map in a sense. Would that be
it's like
fair to say?
Too, or it's like it's not an open world game, but it's a game where you can traverse the map. Like you can traverse back to areas you've been and stuff like that.
Okay. And are those levels still segmented, or if you want to go back to an area, yes, you have to travel through a door or something, and you go back to another level, but at least they're intertwined. Yeah, that's how I understand it. Okay, so yeah, I played the demo for about an hour, and that's the feeling I got. Okay, sorry, you were going to say something?
Oh no, I said I was agreeing with you.
Okay, perfect. So, in relation to Gloomwood, then, can you tell us approximately how long you expect the full game to be, roughly, or are we even allowed to say that yet?
I have absolutely no idea.
Okay,
we have all of the districts we want and stuff planned out, but I have no idea how long that's going to take for people to do.
Yeah, and that type of game might take one person. I don't know, I'm just ballparking here. Let's say it was 8 hours, and then it could take somebody else 16 because they could explore more and they'll take their time, which I'd probably end up doing.
There's definitely going to be optional things to explore.
Brilliant. So that kind of answered that question as well, because it seems more open-ended, Gloomwood. We kind of spoke on this question as well in regards to early access. So it does sound to me like Gloomwood is coming to the early access.
Yes.
Okay, cool. That's cool information. Am I allowed to ask when? No.
We are not sure when it's ready.
Okay.
We have some goals we want to meet. But nothing, as in the New Blood fashion, we are not going to announce anything until we are absolutely sure of it.
Yes. So when it's ready, 2022. Nah, I'm just joking, but when it's ready. And to be fair,
Hope this year, but we're not making any promises.
Okay.
Hope is not the same thing as plan, if that makes sense.
okay. So you heard it here first, guys. Possibly 2022. Or
Yes. Possibly.
the early access. Okay, that's as
Promises.
best. That's promises. That's as best as I'm gonna get.
Exactly.
So maybe a last couple of things.
Sure.
So just some questions to yourself, really. Give me your top 3 games, actually, and why. Maybe
Let's see. Stalker: Shadow of Chernobyl, Resident Evil the remake, and Doom. I count. I'm just gonna say Doom as a whole, and I count Doom 1, Doom 2, and Doom 64 as all part of that.
Yeah. All classics. Very cool. And so just one other thing. What are you playing now? Are you playing anything interesting now that maybe outside your norm, or
Let's see. I haven't actually played much this week. And I just finished a game called The End of Dias, which is extremely good. And I would definitely recommend anyone who has an interest in like Link to the Past or games of that type, but you want that same thing in first person. Check that out. It's very.
That's on Steam, is it?
Yep.
Cool.
It's a pretty unknown. When someone suggested it to me, I think it had maybe 30 reviews. And it deserves way more than that. Let's see, what else? Kingdom of the Dead just came out, which I like that guy's game, so I've been working on finishing that.
Cool.
I haven't yet.
I've not heard of that one as well, so I'm gonna have to look that one up too.
It's a boomer shooter-ish game, but it's all in hand-drawn black and white.
Okay.
Which is really cool.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm actually at a point right now where I need to decide what the next sort of big game I want to play is.
Yeah, and you're not like me where I try and have a look at my backlog all the time. It's like, don't pick that up because you're playing this. So yeah, I'm trying to be a bit better there, but
yeah, I should be better about that as well. I have an enormous backlog and an enormous wish list too. Just keeps getting bigger.
Yeah. The wish list is dangerous in a way, and then Steam sales and everything else. Maybe one or two other questions. Well, how has social media helped in general? I mean, you guys are pretty vocal on Twitter, and some of the tweets are pretty hilarious. But yeah, I mean, I suppose it definitely it's great to see some of the games being teased through Twitter and whatever else. But were you guys always online social media once Dusk started coming out, or is it just a case now that has it helped obviously the early access and stuff like that? I assume it has.
It's really hard to know, honestly. I think in general it's really hard to tell how much like interactions and stuff on Twitter actually equate to some tangible sales or benefit or anything like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have been on Twitter since the beginning of Dusk. I was on Twitter before that, but then I deleted my account for a variety of reasons. But I don't know how much it's helped, to be honest. I don't think it hinders. I think it could hinder if things go poorly. One of us says the wrong thing.
Okay, yeah. With the cancel culture, that can happen. Yeah, but don't take Twitter too seriously, people. But that's just me. But no, it's definitely great to kind of get those little snippets and follow some of the work that you're doing online. So, I mean, we've got as much information I think we can from Gloomwood anyway. So I'll just repeat, quite possibly 2022, and at least we all know now that it's coming to early access, which is great.
Yeah.
One other thing, is there going to be a Dusk 2? Surely there is.
But I'm not sure when. I think there has to be, but I don't know when.
Yeah, I think every Dusk fan on the planet is going to be saying, but surely you have to have a second game.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's 2023 then, right? No.
Well, it's definitely not going to be until after Gloomwood is done.
Yeah. Okay, so it's quite possible that when Gloomwood is done, that's the next project.
Possibly, but I don't know. I don't have plans. I don't really plan ahead very much with this stuff. Right now, I'm happy working on Gloomwood and my own, side stuff.
Yeah. I'm just probing because ultimately we all want Dusk too. Yeah. But that's kind of really all I wanted to talk to. I know you haven't got much time left, but what I would like to say is it's been really great talking to you. This is pretty big deal to me. My channel is quite small, and I only probably started maybe a year and a half ago. So all I was really was a gamer and a fan. And then I started my own YouTube thing, and as I said, it's really quite small. But I didn't expect in a few years' time that I'd actually talking to the person who made one of my favorite games of the last decade, really. So this is pretty great to me. And yeah, I hope everybody has enjoyed this interview today. And yeah, have you have anything else to say, Dave, before we go?
Let's see. Well, if you want to see all sorts of terrible memes and stuff, you can follow me on Twitter. Which is @duskdev.
I'll stick all the links in the description as well. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, yeah. I have a new game coming out March 10th, which is just a small horror game called Iron Lung. It's a submarine under ocean horror thing.
I picked up on that on Twitter, and I don't know if you saw my message or not. I just responded because what's this? How did I miss this? So that's coming out quite soon, is it?
Yeah, March 10th.
March 10th, sweet. So not long till the next game, really. But you mentioned it's quite short. Is it just?
Yes.
Okay.
About an hour long or so.
Cool, but still. I definitely want to check that out. So what's it called again? Sorry, David. Just
Iron Lung.
Iron Lung, sweet. I'm actually going to try and check that out actually, and maybe try and cover it in the next week or two if I can. I just get some details on what it's about. But sure. I did see a tweet about it. All right.
Yeah, if you want a press key, shoot me your email and I'll add you to.
Perfect, great, and I think my subscribers would love to see that too. So that'll be really cool. But that's it for today, guys. Thanks very much again to David for taking the time to have a chat with me here.
Yeah, not a problem.
And guys, I'll see you on the next video. Thanks for watching. Thanks, David. I appreciate it.
Yep.